Mirko, thank you very much for inviting me to do this interview. And I know you said to me, I have 4 questions, but I have to say, your 4 questions are incredible.
The prize winner soprano Katerina Mina was born in Cyprus and makes her home in London, where she studied voice and piano at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Katerina Mina's concert repertoire includes, for example, the Verdi and the Mozart Requiems and Beethoven's Symphony No. 9. She is now preparing a number of new roles for the stage, such as Tosca and Leonora. She is an ambassador of the UK Friends of Israel Opera, and in March 2022, she received a medal at the Stockholm Culture Awards for her contribution to opera. Our reporter Mirko Ricci has met Katerina. When exactly did she decide to devote herself to music?
So when I was 4 years old, I went to my parents and I asked them to enroll me for classical ballet lessons. Bearing in mind I was born in Cyprus, where the tradition for classical music is quite limited. Nobody to this day knows how I came up with this idea of wanting to start classical ballet. And my parents never said no to me. I'm so very thankful. So they did. They arranged for that. And for the next 10 years then in my life, I was really a fanatic of classical ballet. And I think to this day, if I wouldn't be so much involved in the classical music with my piano playing and my singing, I would definitely be a dancer. Then when I was 6 years old, I went back to my parents and asked them to buy me a piano. Again, nobody knows how I came up with these ideas. So they bought me a piano. It was an upright piano at the time. And I started learning the piano at the age of 6. And this is how I entered the Guildhall School of Music and Drama here in London as a pianist. And I graduated as an opera singer. So the singing, the classical singing and the operatic singing came quite later on in my life. I was 16, still in Cyprus, when I entered the choir of the conservatoire. And I was taking singing quite lightly. But the chorus master heard my voice within the other voices, and he decided to telephone my mother and to tell her that I have a stunning voice, that it would be a shame if I didn't develop. And this is how everything started with the singing. So it was interesting when I entered the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and I was a pianist. I had the singing as my second study. But within 2 years, and even though I was an excellent pianist and had great results in my end-of-year examinations, my teacher for the singing said to me, look, this is the moment for you to make that decision, which one of the 2 instruments will take you forward in life and in your career. And I then decided to audition and enter. I was successful and I entered the singers at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, the classical singing department in my 3rd year. It was as if I was swimming in very deep water, but that was my passion. In the end, it was the right decision to take.
Who inspired her in her career?
It's a great question, yes. So it depends. The inspirations can come from different directions. And as a musician in general, I think I was inspired from my soul, and my heart inspired me, because from a very, very young age, I was coming up with these ideas of wanting to be involved with classical music out of all the genres of music. What inspired me then as a singer, when I began to sing, and before actually, I would have these images of myself being in the center of a huge stage and performing, singing to a big crowd. That image itself was a great inspiration for me to make that change and become the opera singer. Whilst I was an opera singer, and to this day, I am being inspired by different singers, operatic singers, as we go along. At the beginning, it was and still is Maria Callas, because she had that combination of various forms of art, not just the singing, not just the voice, which was very individual and unique, but she combined the beauty, first of all, of herself as a woman, when she eventually lost so much weight and became an etiquette of the opera. And she was an actress. She was a stage animal. And I think my inspiration comes from that, from how she would perceive a role, a character, and make it her own. But along then the way of the career, along the journey, so many more opera singers. Or if I watch someone live, for example, when I saw Jonas Kaufmann to sing live for the first time, that was an experience for me that I will never forget. It was almost as if heaven opened, gods entered the stage, and that heavenly voice touched my soul in that way. But I was incredibly inspired, for example, by Mirella Freni, because of her ability. She had a lyrical voice, but at the same time, her ability to sustain more dramatic roles was unbelievable. And I remember I learned a lot from watching Mirella Freni perform on YouTube. I did not have the honor to see her perform live, but there's so much we can learn nowadays by just going online and watching all these incredible singers. So yes, it can be soprani, it can be tenori, it can be baritones that inspire me. It depends. Everything comes down to that magical moment, I think, when it comes to inspiration. It's that magical moment that only happens mainly in an opera house, and it depends. For example, very recently I was inspired so much by Alexandra Kurzak, who is Roberto Alagna's wife, and she is a very famous soprano, and I saw her perform both roles in the double bill of Cavalleria Rusticana and Pagliacci. And for me, the way she performed those two roles was absolutely incredible and utterly inspirational. And I know when I am watching a live performance of an opera and at the end, I get out of the opera house and I start singing, I know that I've been incredibly inspired. It doesn't happen every time.
Which are the most beautiful moments related to her career as a singer?
I know, Mirko, thank you very much for inviting me to do this interview. And I know you said to me, I have 4 questions, but I have to say, your 4 questions are incredible. Just spot on. Because they don't have the obvious answer. It's many moments that have been special. I think it will definitely be also in the future, even if I had a beautiful and incredibly special moment, it always is a moment in time. And God forbid if there wouldn't be any more beautiful and special moments in one's career in the future, because time is unlimited. So I expect to have a lot more of these beautiful and special moments, and it's difficult now to pinpoint those moments that I experienced already. But for example, when for an opera singer you have your debut role, and it's the first time you are thrown on stage and you will do your first operatic role, I bet that is a very special moment. And I will never forget this moment, because I was in my country, in Cyprus. I was chosen to take part in the biggest opera festival there in Paphos. It was an incredibly magical moment, because you've got the castle, it's outdoors, and the opera is built by the castle. It's a huge affair. And that year, the Polish National Opera was performing La Traviata. The Polish National Opera is one of the best opera houses in the world, and the theater itself in Poland is incredibly big. So they come with these huge productions. And it was my first operatic role, and I performed the role of Flora, not of Violetta. I was chosen to do the second role. And I will never forget this moment. It was an incredibly beautiful and special moment, stressful at the same time, incredibly exciting. And if you were to tell me, well, look, in a couple of years, you would have sung the main role of Violetta. And so I did. So everything, it becomes a part of the journey, and that beautiful moment leads you to the next beautiful moment. Because when I performed the role of Violetta, for example, the main role from La Traviata. And it was, again, the first performance, my debut in that role, was again outdoors in a huge production in the Middle East, which was built by the sea. And I performed the role, and under conditions, weather conditions that were very interesting because there was a lot of wind. So for example, when I was singing at the last act, her death scene, I was never aware that they had to bring extra people to hold the set because the wind was so much that the set was almost falling on my bed, on my deathbed. But when you are performing, you're becoming one with that role. You're really not aware of what might be happening around you. And those are special moments. I'm sure that if I perform, for example, at the Metropolitan Opera, where I haven't performed yet, that will be an incredibly special moment. But for me, I find beauty in every moment that is special for my soul. Another special moment and very beautiful, for example, moment was when I sang next to Stephen Hawking, which you know, is an unbelievable feature, let's say. And I remember when I finished my performance, I went backstage, and Rick Wakeman, who is another legend of rock, who was in the wings waiting to go on that same stage and perform, was waiting for me with open arms because he just adored my voice. So these are the special moments for me. These are very, very special and beautiful moments, and I really hope that there are going to be a lot more.
Which is our message to the new generation?
It's another great question, because in relation to the new generation, we have entered an era where for example, in the last, let's say, 3 years, we have experienced so much that we haven't experienced in the last many years, for example. So many phenomena that happened. We had the pandemic to deal with. As soon as the pandemic finished, we have a war to deal with. And changes that happen in the countries, and for example in England, you know, with Brexit, and now we're seeing a very, very different new era with the death of our Queen, the passing of our Queen, and the fact that we are going to have a king. There's so many changes, and I really, really wish and hope that the new generation knows and learns how to not forget their tradition, not forget the traditions, not forget where they come from, not ever forget the history of their own countries. And for example, I come from Cyprus. You know, the political problem and issue in Cyprus goes back to 1975, which was before I was born. But I have this fear that the new generation might not even be aware of the history of their country, of where they belong, their ancestors, their families, their grandparents, what they went through. And also, I am a little bit skeptical about this huge and rapid development on technology and on everything to do with online situations. I see my nephew, for example, he's 5 and years old, and he's learning everything from his iPad. And when you actually ask the children to spend time and take a book and a writing book also and start writing, and I think that we will go through a massive change going forward that will have an impact on the new generation. And that impact may not be always positive. But at the same time, I think that there is no other way. We have to go through this in order to appreciate more what we had. That's the only way that we will then go back to what we had. The new generation must certainly focus more on the virtues of love, on the virtues of honesty, of freedom, and of freedom of speech also. And they really must crave a world without war, a world without so many problems and conflicts that we actually create. We create the nations. We create that. But the new generation must also be more spiritual and must not forget that we are all the creation of the universe, and the possibilities can be endless, but only when we're open to them, only when we're open to the change, and when we also ask the universe for the good things. Thank you.